Hello. Welcome everyone to our first post-Pesach post. Today we're going to talk about Parashat Tazria. So Parashat Tazria, most of it talks about the halachot of tzaraat, of leprosy, which we will talk about next week. And today I'm going to talk about the beginning of the parsha, which talks about a child being born, and then he has to have the bris. And there's a discussion about the woman's days after the birth. But we're going to talk about that first verse. Isha ki tazria v'yalda zachar. A woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth. There's a famous story, famous MyDrash that most of us have probably heard, which talks about what happens in the womb during those 9 months. And according to what we've been told, many of us over the years, is that while the womb is while the child is in the womb, then he or she is being taught all the Torah, and then a moment before they leave the womb, then they are the angel that taught them all the Torah makes them forget, and so we need to relearn it when we are as we grow. Today I'm going to look at a MyDrash that talks about this issue, but with a bit of an important emphasis, which gives it a very different spin to what I thought, at least until I saw this MyDrash. The MyDrash talks about, is troubled by the fact that the verse starts with the words Isha ki tazria v'yalda zachar. Since the rest of the discussion in the Torah there is about the Mila and things that happen post pregnancy, it's not clear why we care about that first bit, Isha ki tazria. Why are we talking about the moment that she gets seeded, the moment that she becomes pregnant? It doesn't seem to have any halachic implications or ramifications, and so why is it even mentioned? So the MyDrash sees this as referring to the fact that there is some sort of a process, not just a physical one that takes 9 months, but also a spiritual one. And yes, as you imagine, it's the process of learning Torah in the womb, but it's a bit more emphasized, a bit more like focused than just that. The MyDrash says like this: Amar Adam, the first Adam when he was created, said, Achar shebarah HaKadosh Baruch Hu kol habehemot ve'arofot ve'ashkatzim ve'ramasim ve'achar kach bara oti. I was created only after God created all the animals. Kach hatinok hazeh. So that's a quote of Adam's words, and now the MyDrash is saying, Kach hatinok hazeh ad shelo yatsa mimei imo HaKadosh Baruch Hu metzaveh oto ve'omer lo Mizeh tochal u'mizeh lo tochal. So, in a similar way to Adam, so this child, this baby, until he did not leave the womb of his mother, God commands him and says to him or to her, from this you shall eat, from this you shall not eat. V'zeh lachem hatameh, et zeh tochlu, achet zeh lo tochlu. That's just a quote of the verse from Vayikra. It talks about the food we are allowed to eat and we are not allowed to eat. After he's accepted all the mitzvot in the Torah, that's when he is born. He or she is born. Throughout this talk, I may interchangeably refer to the fetus as being a he or a she. Of course, things apply to both genders. So, what's interesting about this MyDrash is that it doesn't just say, even though it ends up by saying accepting all the mitzvot of the Torah, it initially starts off by focusing on what you cannot and what you can eat. The laws of Kashrut. Why is that? And what is the connection to Adam? Why is it that the MyDrash brings, in this context, Adam? Okay, when he was created. So, first of all, in terms of Kashrut, one technical answer can be that it has to do with the end of the previous parasha. The previous parasha, Shmini, talks exactly about the laws of Kashrut, of what animals you are allowed to eat and what you're not allowed to eat. And so the Midrash might be simply making a textual connection, saying the halachot that were learned until now are what is taught to the child, which is what we're talking about at the beginning of this parasha. However, as you know, we're not going to make do with that. We're going to go much deeper than that answer. The answer, of course, is to think about, at least there's sort of two things to point out. First of all, is the connection to Adam. Right? Adam and Eden. First of all, connecting Adam and Eden to a fetus is a very interesting concept. Okay, because if you think about the existence of Adam and Eve in Eden, it was very much like a baby inside the womb, in the sense that all of Adam and Eve's needs were taken care of. They didn't have to work for a living. They simply had food given to them whenever they needed it. It was a small little garden compared to the rest of the world which was out there, sort of this enclosed place which was safe and they didn't need to do anything to survive, which is very similar to the way that a child is inside the womb of his mother. And I think that this comparison, has a lot that we can learn from. But today we're going to focus on a very specific sliver of it. But I think it's a very inspiring connection. Okay, that can maybe help us understand, as we will today, some ideas about what happened in the Garden of Eden, what the purpose of that period in our history was. But today I want to focus on the Kashrut issue. And the interesting thing is that when you think about the connection to Adam and between Adam and a child in the womb, then it is very interesting to see that in both cases food takes prominence in terms of God's mitzvot. With Adam, the first command that Adam and Chava were given, if we discount the command of pulvu, to procreate, which, even though halachically it is indeed a mitzvah, can be understood in the context as more being a general guideline as to sort of what God expects one to do, the first command, the first halacha that we see is the halacha that has to do with food. Right? Adam is told that he can eat anything that is any vegetable, and except for the fruits of the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. And so the first command, right, the first mitzvah that Adam has is not one of deep philosophical meaning. It's not one of doing justice. It's not about bringing a sacrifice. No, it's only about food. It's about what you can and cannot eat. Right, and interestingly enough, Adam is not allowed to eat any animals, and indeed this is sort of part of what the Midrash was saying. Midrash is a bit cryptic. It starts off by saying, Adam asked the question, why is it that God creates me after all these animals? And then he goes on to say, just like the child before he is born is told what he can and cannot eat. It doesn't seem to answer the question, why is Adam created after all this? But now we understand, meaning just like the child in the womb is supposedly being taught the halachot of Kashrut, Adam is also being taught the halachot of Kashrut. And according to this midrash, God created all the animals so that he could be told what he can and cannot eat when he is created. Even though all these animals that are created afterwards, the birds, the cattle, animals, all those are actually not allowed for him to eat, to kill. Still, they are created first so that he knows the halachot. So, in a sense, the Midrash is asking, in this context, I'd say, why do I need all these things? If the world is for me, then why is God creating all these things before me if I can't enjoy them? And the answer is, you need to know the laws. Now, what does it mean, though, that the fetus is being taught, the child is being taught in the womb, all the halachot of Kashrut? So fine, we talked about the textual connection, but what is the meaning of it on a deeper sense? I believe that it's actually straightforward on a physical level. The one mitzvah, the one set of mitzvot that a child is learning in the womb really is Hilchot Kashrut, because while it does nothing really inside there except for grow, it's constantly feeding off of the food that his or her mother, is consuming. And so, without making any kind of choices, without any kind of free choice, it's already being exposed to all the right foods and not being exposed to all the bad foods, assuming, of course, that the child is the child of a halachically committed parent. And so, and so there really is this parallel where the first mitzvah that Adam deals with is food, and the first mitzvah that a child is exposed to, a Jewish child is exposed to, is kashrut, is what they eat and what they don't eat, which I think is a very, very nice connection. Of course, the question is, what is the meaning? What is the meaning of this connection? Meaning, even if we understand the parallel, what is the significance of this fact? Why is it really that the first thing that we get exposed to, that the first halakha that we get exposed to on a spiritual level, is that of kashrut? Why was it that Adam, when he was created, and he was this amazing, mysterious being, which we don't fully understand, why is it that the first mitzvah that he gets exposed to has to do with food? Now, about that, I just want to first add and say that, of course, the story of creation is a very complicated one. It's very, very difficult for us to understand what it means to be in the Garden of Eden, what that kind of existence was, where there are talking snakes, and there's an ability. Well, what is this tree of knowledge and the tree of life? There's a lot of questions about that period, and so one could come along and argue that that Adam was not commanded to first do something that had to do with food, because it's all allegorical, because it really wasn't real food, it was something spiritual, and what we're exposed to here is just like some sort of a parable of a parable, and it's sort of all like written in code, so to speak. And I accept that for sure is true. We definitely do not understand really what is the meaning of the story of Adam and Eve, and basically I guess until the end of the flood of the Mabul, there are many more questions than there are answers. However, even if we accept that it's an allegory to something spiritual, the fact that the Torah decided to use a command about food to express that allegory is meaningful. In fact, that's, I think, what the Midrash here is saying, right? Is by making that connection between a fetus eating real food and Adam's sin, it's saying that use of food is meaningful, that it's not coincidental, that there's a reason why we do that. I think that the answer is pretty straightforward once you think about what it means that a fetus already is in the cycle of being commanded by God what to eat and what not to eat. Before anything happens in this world, we are biological entities. Rav Soloveitchik talks about this in his book, The Emergence of Ethical Man, that before anything, we are first of all biological entities. And we need to survive in this world. And so it's only natural that the first thing that we need to think about, the first drive that we have, before anything, is that of food. How to find food, how to make it, how to find the right food to sustain us. And from a spiritual sense, when we are just a soul, when we are just spirit, then we have no need for anything. Meaning, there is no, to the best of our understanding, there is no progression. There is no interaction with God in the sense of action. When we are just spiritual, things are static. This is the world where we can grow. This is the world where we can do mitzvot and sort of prepare ourselves for what will happen after this world. But after this world, it's all going to be static. We're going to remain in the same place, and our relationship to God will will remain the same. So there's no interaction in the sense that there's no action, there's no change that takes place spiritually. In order for change to be possible, we need to be able to be in touch with the physical. Why this is, the deep philosophical and mystical reasons, is beyond the scope of this discussion. But it is clear, at least from a Jewish perspective, that this is true. That this taking corporeal form, taking physical form, is a prerequisite to be able to have any kind of change that occurs with us, any kind of development or growth. The chiddush of this midrash is to say, not only is that a prerequisite, but it is a sufficient condition. The very moment that the physical and the spiritual meet, at that very moment the spark of interaction, the spark of growth and of change suddenly arises. And so immediately, without even a moment's delay, God commands. God's commands are the way of saying that God interacts with the world, that He has guidelines, and He says, just like the food, right? In our case, just like food has right and wrong on a physical level, just like food has guidelines what you should and should not eat, things that are and are not healthy. So there will be mitzvot. There will be guides for your soul that will tell you what is right and wrong for you, and you cannot separate those two. The very moment that there's a physical manifestation to your spiritual existence, a spiritual connection to your spiritual existence, the moment that happens, that's when mitzvot start. That's when things start to pile up. The moment that a Jewish boy gets into being, God commands him and starts to guide him spiritually as to what he should, or he or she should or should not eat. And in that sense, we can now understand also what happened with Adam. That Adam, that's what it's saying to us there too. That Adam, when he was created, to whatever this thing is an allegory, the very moment of creation, though, was when he, and becoming physical, is the moment in which he began to be commanded as to what he can and cannot do. Food was just either an allegory or just the first thing, but it's the very fact of a command that's significant over here. The Midrash, right before the one we read, talks about how Adam's soul was created at the beginning of the sixth day, but he himself was only created at the end. And in between, the last bits of creation were put in place. And so only once, I think what they're trying to say there, amongst other things, is what we just said. That there was a difference between man's spiritual existence and man's physical existence, and only once we are in that physical existence, and immediately once we are in that physical existence, do we become commanded, which really means not that God expects us from when we're fetuses to do what's right and wrong, but it means that from that moment there is motion. From that moment there is change, and that God is part and is a willing part of that change, who wants to sort of guide us from the very moment of our first moment of our existence to the correct way of living in harmony with Him. So, without further ado, Shabbat Shalom, and see you next week.